The New York Rangers have acquired JT Miller from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for Filip Chytil, Victor Mancini, and a protected first-round pick. We break down this trade from every angle and talk about why it is the ultimate boom or bust move for the Rangers.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1238 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, wow, this is real life. This is not a drill. This is indeed happening. JT Miller is on his way back to the New York Rangers, the same team that drafted him so many years ago. The full trade, the Rangers get JT Miller along with a couple of defensemen, Erik Brannstrom and Jackson Dorrington, in exchange for Filip Chytil, Victor Mancini, and a protected first-round draft pick. Obviously, a lot of moving parts both ways, and as the episodes kind of go by here, the days go by, we'll talk about every player that's involved in this in any way, shape, or form. But for tonight, this is pretty much going to be the JT Miller show. We will have some final thoughts on Chytil and Mancini and some parting words for the two of them at the end of today's episode. But JT Miller, obviously, the superstar among this bunch of players here. And as far as the trade itself, I'm still letting it marinate a little bit because it's kind of just sinking in right now. And it's been a couple hours. Just now, it's starting to realize, it's starting to dawn on me that, this actually is happening. They really did pull the trigger. It's been rumored for weeks, and it has finally come to fruition. Overall, I like the move. I approve of the trade, but I am very nervous about it because this is the ultimate boom or bust, just swing for the fences kind of a trade that I think is done by a general manager that probably feels a little bit of heat right now, probably feels the need to go out there and try to make some kind of an impact move. There's only so many players in the NHL right now that are available via a trade that are not pure rentals, guys that can come in and change the culture of your team, which is, of course, what the Rangers have all but openly come out and said that that's what they're looking to do. JT Miller brings a certain edge, a certain swagger, a certain attitude, a lot of grit to the table. And for all those reasons, I think that he's somebody that the Rangers certainly coveted for some time. And now they go out and they make it happen. Of course, it does come with some risks. Part of the reason why I'm nervous with it is because Miller has burned some bridges. He's clashed with teammates. He's clashed with coaches. He's had some issues, to put it mildly, throughout the years, pretty much ever since he's come into the NHL. If you want to go all the way back to his first stint with the New York Rangers, he got into it with Henrik Lundqvist. A couple of days later, he's traded. It might have even been the next day, but it was definitely within the next couple of days. They deal him to Tampa Bay. He doesn't last long there either. They deal him to Vancouver. And now everything full circle. He's back with the New York Rangers. But what this really comes down to for me, and probably for a lot of you as well, is whatever risk that comes with JT Miller and how he might blend into the locker room or, all the money that's left on his deal, all the years that are left on his deal, is the risk, or rather, is the reward worth the risk? And I think it is. This is a special player. This is somebody that has blossomed into a superstar during his time with the Vancouver Canucks. This season, even with all the drama, all the turmoil in the Canucks locker room, and don't take my word for it, listen to the Canucks president the other day, Rutherford, whatever he said. I don't have the exact quotes in front of me, but basically admitted that there's a lot of drama and it is a problem and something needs to be done. Even with all that going on and Miller being contentious with the media and not getting along with Pettersson and seemingly at odds with Tocchet, even with all that, JT Miller this season still has 9 goals, 26 assists for a total of 35 points in 40 games. So he's right there in terms of a point-per-game player. I think certainly the small regression that he's had this year relative to what he did the last 3 years in Vancouver, a lot of the reason for that regression can probably be chalked up to all the drama that's been happening. Obviously, he was away from the team for a short time as well. And again, saying all that out loud, oh, he doesn't get along with his teammates, and he's contentious with the media, he doesn't get along with his coaches, and he's got some attitude problems. These are all the reasons why I am nervous about this trade. It is a massive high upside, high downside, or low downside, I guess, kind of a deal. It's boom or bust. It's swinging for the fences. It's all or nothing. And the Rangers really have to keep their fingers crossed that Miller can come in and be the player that he's been the last handful of seasons. And also just, be a good soldier and be a good teammate, which has obviously been something of an issue for him in the past. Doesn't mean that he can't come in here and, establish himself as a leader and lay down the law and establish a certain way that the Rangers want to play. He can do all those things once he gets his second foot in the locker room door there. But he's got to keep it within reason and be a good teammate. I don't think that's asking too much. So one other reason why I'm mostly on board with this trade, and I do like this move for the Rangers, is when you look at the return package that the Rangers gave up. Now, I'm not trying to downplay giving away Filip Chytil. By all accounts, just a really good dude. He's obviously been through a lot of adversity through the last couple of seasons here, all the concussions and whatnot. Mancini, a promising defenseman as well. And like I said, we'll get to the two of them a little bit later in the episode. But I also look at this deal and I say, okay, what did we really, not even so much what did we give up here, but let's look at the things that we did not give up here. Because, all these trade talks and trade rumors and what have you, they've been going on for a while here, and you see a bunch of different names being kicked around as far as, what the Rangers might have to give up if they want to be able to land JT Miller. But we heard a couple names. One of them was Alexis Lafreniere. Now, Lafreniere has slowed down considerably, and that's probably an understatement, ever since he signed that big contract extension. There's some people that are worried about that. I mean, a lot of games have gone by between that extension and where we're at now, and Lafreniere hasn't really produced in that amount of time. And again, that's probably putting it mildly. With that said, I don't think that too many Ranger fans were lining up to trade Alexis Lafreniere. We saw the season that he had last year. We saw what he did in the playoffs last year. We saw another strong start for him this season. I got to hope that eventually Lafreniere is going to round back into form. So if it's up to me, I don't want to see Lafreniere as part of this deal, and he's not part of this deal. You also look at somebody like Braden Schneider. Schneider, to me, has become such an unsung hero of this team, one of the more consistent members of the Ranger blue line, and somebody that I think has underrated importance to this team going forward. Because when you look at the Ranger defensemen right now, there aren't really a whole lot of them that seem to have an obvious long-term future with this team. And one of them that could have was Mancini, and he was included in this trade. But Fox is going to be here barring something completely unforeseen. Keandre Miller could go either way. RFA with arbitration rights. I could see them trading Miller. I could see them re-signing Miller. We will see. Lindgren's going to be gone after this season. You got to think. Trouba has already been traded. Zach Jones, I mean, who knows when they'll ever even let him play again, much less, be a long-term part of the plan here. So Schneider's huge. You can't afford to trade him. He's been very consistent, very versatile defenseman. He's played with a million different defense partners ever since he debuted. He's even played the left side at times recently as well. You need to hang on to Braden Schneider. And the Canucks were said to love Schneider. Like, they were really high on Schneider. They really wanted to find a way to get the Rangers to include him, and they didn't do it. And I think you got to give the Rangers, specifically Drury, props for that, to hold firm and refuse to include seemingly Braden Schneider in a deal like this. Adam Sykora was another name that came up as far as, trade talks and somebody that the Rangers might have to part with to get JT Miller. I don't think that would have been the end of the world, but I'm glad he's still here. Sykora was a late second-round pick, somebody who is undersized but plays with just a high motor, high intensity kind of a player. Seems to be somewhat in the vein of a Brett Berard. And I guess you could argue that maybe that makes Sykora expendable because you've got Brett Berard who can do those things. But, former second overall pick, second round pick, Adam Sykora, I think you want to keep him in the fold, everything else being equal. And the Rangers were able to do that too. So, and even Zach Jones, I mean, he somehow survives another trade. I still have my doubts if the Rangers are ever really going to go forward with Zach Jones. But if he's still here next year, Lindgren's going to be on. Maybe he steps into that spot in the lineup. Maybe the Rangers wanted to hang on to Zach Jones. It's certainly at least possible. But bottom line, there were a lot of players that were rumored to be part of this deal that the Rangers were able to hang on to. And I think that's something that should, make Ranger fans feel at least somewhat good about this trade. Because this is going to be a very polarizing trade. I don't need to wait to see the YouTube comment section. I don't even need to look on Ranger Twitter or anything like that. you already know a blockbuster deal of this magnitude, when you acquire a player that has the kind of baggage that JT Miller has, but also the kind of talent and the kind of grit, more importantly, that the Rangers really need right now. Yeah, it's guaranteed to divide the fan base probably right around 50-50. I mean, I really think that might be about where we end up from this, but we will see. But, when you look at, if you take away this current season for Miller, you look at the 3 seasons before that, that's when he really became a bona fide superstar. 242 regular season games, 101 goals, 183 assists, 284 points in the 242 games. He's a plus 40 in that time. And in the last, for the last 5 years, he's been in the top 34 in the Selke voting. He was number 15 last year in the Selke. So a very good defensive forward as well. Obviously, just a phenomenal, really all-around hockey player. I mean, this is a guy that is clearly, I think, the last handful of seasons combined, entered top 20 in the league territory. I mean, top 25, probably at like absolute worst. And again, this is even with a bunch of chaos going on in the Canucks locker room this season. He's also been a playoff performer. You look at his career playoff numbers, they're not spectacular at first glance. 12 goals, 44 assists for a total of 56 points in 91 games. So it's not very eye-popping. But I think part of the reason for that is his first bunch of playoff games with the Rangers, he had a very small role, limited ice time, obviously limited opportunities to do anything. You look at Miller's last 2 playoff runs combined, both of them with the Canucks, 9 goals, 21 assists for a total of 30 points in 30 games. So somebody that as he's gotten better, as his role has expanded, he's done better in the playoffs as well. And certainly everything about Miller's game would tell you that he's built for postseason hockey. And I think a lot of Ranger fans are going to like that too. But bottom line, look, Rangers want to change the identity of this team. Like I said a couple minutes ago, they all but basically shouted that to the heavens when they sent out that memo. They're open for business. We'll trade Trouba. We'll trade Kreider. Of course, Trouba was traded. Kreider could be next. More on that in a little bit as well. But the Rangers, they wanted more edge, more bite, more grit, sandpaper. Use whatever hockey term you want to use. We all know the kind of player that we're talking about. And JT Miller very, very clearly fits that description. And, he plays with a certain fire, a certain intensity, and a certain edge there again that I think right now is lacking from certain key players on this Ranger team. So the Rangers are swinging for the fences, like I said, moving in a new direction and, trying to make JT Miller, obviously the focal point of making this team, just giving this team more edge and more bite. So going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to talk a little bit about the short-term and long-term ramifications. We're also going to bid a brief farewell to Filip Chytil and Victor Mancini a little bit later in the episode and just keep talking about this deal. We'll do all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it has never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of ticket listings. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they will refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go and keep everything rolling here on this very special edition of Locked On New York Rangers. Of course, reacting to the trade of JT Miller to the Rangers, which occurred just a handful of hours ago. For the everydayers, big shout out to you guys. In our next episode, going to break down Rangers Bruins and what will all likelihood be JT Miller's, I don't think we can call it a debut. He's already been here, but his re-emergence, re-debut with the New York Rangers, whatever you want to call it, we'll certainly break that down. Jimmy Vesey, also mad about his role with the Rangers. We'll be talking about that in the next one. But as far as keeping the focus on JT Miller here, I want to first start with the short-term outlook. So the million-dollar question here, if you're the Rangers, or one of several million-dollar questions, because this is a major blockbuster deal, And again, one that could work out spectacularly or blow up in the Rangers' faces and anything in between. I really feel like this is a true wild card of a trade if ever there was one. But again, a trade that I think is worth the somewhat considerable risk that comes with it. But one of the $1 million questions that we've got going on right now is, how do you line up on Saturday against the Bruins if you're the Rangers? You've got some options. The fact that Miller can play all three of the forward positions, that in and of itself provides you with just a multitude of options. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take a look at two different lineup possibilities. I'm going to first look at what I think the Rangers are going to do, and then I'm going to throw out what I would do. So, and in both scenarios, the fourth line is going to be the same. I don't think anybody wants to break up Edstrom, Carrick, and Rempe right now. I mean, I guess you could bump one of them up, but I think for the most part, people are on board with those three staying together because they've done a great job. So here's what I think the Rangers are going to do. I think they'll keep Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere together. That'll be your top line. I think you'll see a second line of Cooley, Mika, and Miller left to right. Because again, Miller can play any position. That will then give you Kreider, Brodzinski, and Smith on the third line. I say Brodzinski because obviously Chytil was just traded, and Brodzinski kind of by default will be the third line center. I don't think the Rangers certainly would keep JT Miller out of the top six, when he makes his debut here. So Brodzinski would have to slot in there for the third line. And I think that the Rangers would probably want to keep Mika in the top six as well. But here's what I would do. I like my option better. This is just, and again, the Rangers, who knows? They could line up completely differently. They could throw all these lines in a blender. Certainly, they could break up the Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line. Flashes of what they did last year, but certainly on the whole, not nearly as good this year as they were last year. But bottom line, this is what I would do. I, too, would keep Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere together and just hope for the best that these guys can break out of it. Second line, I'm going left to right. We're going to go Will Cooley. We're going to go JT Miller at center and Riley Smith on the right wing. Cooley and Miller together, that could be a lot of fun. Those guys will both hit anything that moves. They will make the board shake. I think Ranger fans are starved for a line like this. And Smith, not a big hitter, but he does get in there on the forecheck very quickly. That could be a really fun, hardworking, blue-collar, but also skilled forechecking line for this Ranger team. And Smith gives you a speed dynamic to that line as well. Not that the other two are slow, but Smith, that's one of the things that he brings is his speed. And then the third line for me would be left to right, Kreider, Mika, Brodzinski. Kreider and Mika both played exceptionally poorly in the most recent game. I know there's going to be some people calling for them to be healthy scratches. Realistically, that's just not going to happen. Bottom line, though, get them out of the top six. They can always earn their way back into it if they play a little bit sharper and in some cases just look like they want to be there. And that might be step one for these guys. But I'm dropping them both out of the top six. They can go back together, try to rediscover the chemistry that they have together. You put Brodzinski with them almost like by default. I mean, he's going to be in for Kaliev. That's the rumor at practice. So Brodzinski plays with some energy. Maybe he gives them a little bit of a spark. I mean, who knows? It's hard to rely on Brodzinski. You shouldn't have to rely on Brodzinski to get your two, high-paid, high-profile, two longest tenured members of this Ranger team going. But that's kind of where we're at right now with those two. And then, of course, I'm leaving the fourth line as is. As far as the power play goes, I feel like what the Rangers are going to do is probably, at least at the start, just put Miller into Chytil's old spot on the second power play unit. Not me. Give me JT Miller right away, right off the bat, right into the fire, right into the deep end. Give me him on the Rangers' top power play unit and bump Mika Zibanejad down to the second unit. Plain and simple. Mika just hasn't done enough to keep his spot there. I mean, there might be some people saying maybe bump Kreider down. You could leave Mika there. Kreider, in theory, can still get some deflection goals. He can still screen. I mean, he at least goes to the front of the net for the most part on the power play. Mika on the power play right now is just going to whiff on one-timers and give the puck away. So, and I'm sorry, that might be kind of harsh, but you saw what he did in the last game. So for me, it's Mika that's got to pay the price, and he's got to drop down to the second unit. Another short-term question here, beyond just the lineup, is how do the Rangers react to this? Because Filip Chytil, for good reason, very popular, very well-liked member of the Ranger locker room. Guys seem to really like Chytil, and I think for sure, just about every player on this Ranger team has been in Filip Chytil's corner the last handful of seasons. Like I said, he's gone through basically gone through hell with all the concussion issues that he's had. The collapse in practice last year, it wasn't even practice. It was basically an open skate with the healthy scratches. He falls down. He needs help off the ice. Only played the 10 regular season games last year, back this year, and, having a solid season. But, unfortunate that obviously they had to trade him. But the cold hard reality of the situation here is you got to give up something to get JT Miller. You're not going to get him for free. The Rangers got him at a discount, and I think a fairly significant one. But you're going to have to give up something, somewhat significant back in the other direction to make this deal happen. Otherwise, the Canucks might just not pull the trigger. But again, I bring you back to my original question. How do the Rangers react in the locker room to this, to losing such a popular member, such a well-liked member of this team, and somebody that's been here for a lot of Ranger success and some deep playoff runs the last couple of seasons? We've seen the Rangers basically throw a fit and sit and sulk when the organization makes moves that they don't personally approve of, as if it's their place to say that. The Barclay Goodrow situation in the offseason probably could have been handled a little bit better. The Jacob Trouba situation during the season and during the offseason as well probably could have been handled a little bit better. There is a human side to the NHL, and there is a human side when guys are being waived and guys are being traded and they're being sent to places that they don't want to go. I mean, in the case of Goodrow and Trouba, they both go from New York to California. It's not exactly right down the street, but that's also the nature of the business. And when you're a player on this Ranger team, I don't think it's your place to throw a fit about this and just throw in the towel and give up and mail it in the way that the Rangers did for a stretch of, I think, 23 games. I think 4-19 was their final, record when they were going through just that atrocious spell of hockey that they went through in November and December. So is the same thing going to happen now? That's a fair question. The difference here is they are getting a heck of a player back in JT Miller. And no disrespect to Vakanainen and Borgen, who came over in the other two deals that the Rangers made. I think both of them have played reasonably well since they've gotten here, but they're not the high-profile superstar player that JT Miller is. So hopefully these Ranger players can, I don't even know see the forest for the trees. Is that the expression? They can see the big picture here. They can understand that, okay, to get a superstar player like JT Miller, we have to give up something, and it ends up being Filip Chytil. Hopefully they can get over it. Hopefully they can be professionals and still go forward and do everything they can to win this game on Saturday, win games going forward, try to scratch and claw and fight your way back into the playoff picture. That's what needs to happen. And anything less than that, anything less than guys giving full effort to do exactly that is unacceptable. You know what? If they want to be mad about this, if they want to be upset about Filip Chytil being traded, fine. Do it right now. Get it out of your system. Go hit the punching bag. Yell into your pillow. Do whatever you got to do. Do whatever you got to do. Curse out, call up your teammate, curse out Drury on the phone, do whatever you got to do. You don't have to be friends with the GM. You don't have to like everything that he does. But when the puck drops and it's time to play hockey, it's just that. It's time to play hockey. And the Rangers need to get over whatever, sadness or upsetness comes with this trade of Filip Chytil. And I don't say that lightly because I like Chytil too. It's really tough to see him go. But again, it's JT Miller. You got to give up something. And Filip Chytil became, basically the casualty to bring a star player back to New York. But in just a second, where I keep everything rolling, I want to shift our attention a little bit more to the bigger picture, the long-term picture with JT Miller as a member of the Rangers, because in all likelihood, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He's got another 5 years left on his contract after this one ends. Big cap hit as well. So what does that mean for the Rangers going forward? We'll discuss that. And then, like I said, we will say goodbye to Filip Chytil and Victor Mancini. We've kind of been talking about Chytil on and off the entire episode, but we'll say a couple of final thoughts about him as well. We're going to do all that good stuff in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit about the long-term ramifications of this deal here, bringing in, once again, JT Miller back to the New York Rangers. So one of the things that I thought of almost immediately is that, they're acquiring obviously a big time player, but he also comes with a big cap hit, $8 million per season to be exact. They do shed some cap in, Filip Chytil going the other way. He makes more than $4 million per season. But I think what's going to happen here, and it could happen within the next few days, it could happen sometime before the trade deadline, or I think the most likely outcome is it doesn't happen until the offseason. But I've been saying this all along, and I'll double down on it right now. I think before opening night next season, Chris Kreider will be an ex-New York Ranger. I think in some ways, JT Miller is almost here to replace him. Chris, when you look at Kreider this season, maybe some of it's due to injury, the bad back or whatever. He's just not playing the kind of hockey that a long-tenured member, a guy that should basically be the de facto captain right now, needs to be playing. He's the longest tenured Ranger, and he's just not going out there, at least to me, and setting the kind of example that needs to be set for the rest of this team, especially when they don't have a captain officially right now. As far as Kreider being traded, I mean, again, I think before the start of next season at the latest, but it could happen before then. My guess, again, is that he will make it through the rest of the season. But if you deal Chris Kreider, if you trade him away for like a draft pick, then what it does is it somewhat offsets the cap hit of JT Miller. Now, Kreider is only signed for 2 more years after this year, whereas Miller's signed for 5. But in the short term, you will get some cap relief for JT Miller. And keep in mind, you already shed some cap by trading Filip Chytil. And in the long term, the cap looks like it's going to steadily rise the next couple of seasons. There was a report by Elliot Friedman the last couple of years. So $8 million sounds like a lot, and it is. But that contract that JT Miller has, that cap hit that he carries, that's going to become more and more affordable as the seasons go on because he's locked in at that number. So whatever percentage Miller's taking up right now of the cap hit, it'll be a lower percentage next year, a lower percentage the year after that, so on and so forth. So that's positive as well. And, between the report that the cap hit is going to increase significantly next season and beyond, between that and the fact that the Rangers just laid an egg against the Canes, lost 4-0 on a night where the superstar players were not just non-effective, but actual liabilities, I do wonder if that gave Drury that last final push to go ahead and sign the deal, sign the whatever it is, the agreement, to go ahead and push this deal through. I have no doubt that these two teams have been going back and forth, and it's certainly possible the deal has been very close the last handful of days here. But I do wonder if those two things together, the timing of both those things didn't encourage Drury that, okay, yeah, we got to do this. We got to bring back JT Miller. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger. I do want to address a concern that a lot of Ranger fans have right now, because again, there's going to be some people that do not like this move. I can tell you that already. I mostly like it, but I can certainly acknowledge the risk. One concern that a lot of people have is the age of the Ranger centers. You look at Trocheck, Miller, and Mika. All 3 of them right now are 31 years old, but they're all signed for a lot more time. Trocheck has 4 more years after this year. Miller has 5 more years after this year. Mika has 5 more years after this year. Trocheck will be 35 when his contract runs out. Miller and Mika will both be 37. They all have no trade protection of some kind throughout the entire duration of this contract. Now, all of them right now have full no-move clauses, but with Trocheck and Miller, those will become no-trade clauses in the not-too-distant future. We'll break that down in greater detail in a future episode. But, yeah, I mean, look, it's a valid concern. I mean, these guys are getting old, and if JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad are both on this team at the age of 37, that might not be an ideal situation. One other thing while we're talking about Trocheck here, too. Vince Mercogliano tweeted this out. He's apparently, Trocheck, that is a good personal friend of JT Miller. And apparently Trocheck was a big advocate of this deal. Vince also mentioned that he thinks that Trocheck is going to be the next Ranger captain next season. I get the same impression. And I think you could see JT Miller as an alternate captain as soon as next season, too. Because if Trocheck and Miller are buddies and they both obviously play a hard-nosed, in-your-face, edgy style out there, that's a solid leadership group for next season. I don't know who the other alternates will be. Again, I think Kreider is going to be gone. So you've got JT Miller as the captain and no, I'm sorry. Vincent Trocheck is the captain. JT Miller is an alternate captain. I mean, you could just go with Panarin as an alternate and Fox could still be an alternate, maybe even Mika. I mean, who knows? But we'll see how it goes. I do think you could see Miller wearing a letter next season. We also talked about Kreider a minute ago and how I believe the Rangers are looking to move him. I think in a best case scenario for the Rangers that they would try to trade Mika Zibanejad before the start of next season as well. There were reports that they were looking to try to trade Mika for Miller, just straight up 1-for-1. I would have loved that deal. I would have liked that one even better than the one that they just pulled off. They didn't do it, obviously. I mean, I don't know who in their right mind would trade for Mika Zibanejad right now based on how he's played and the fact that he carries an $8.5 million cap hit for the next half decade after this season. So that's obviously a hurdle, but, they might try to lean on Mika in the offseason and see if they can, get him to waive the no-move clause. Because, again, I think Kreider will be gone. Maybe if Kreider's gone, it's easier to convince Mika to accept a trade as well. But this leads me to kind of my, I guess, hottest take of this, maybe this entire episode here, that this trade the Rangers made for JT Miller, it is more about next season than it is about this season. Because, of course, they made this deal. I'm sure they think that they can still make the playoffs. I'm sure they would still like to make the playoffs and just kind of roll with the idea of, just get in and let's see what happens. Maybe we can do some damage and surprise some people. And I'm sure, that could certainly happen. I mean, they're on the outside looking in. We'll see how it goes here going forward. But the reason I say this more than anything else is I think the Rangers are looking to do something that I've talked about before on here. They are looking to do a retooling rather than a full-fledged teardown rebuild. The full-fledged teardown rebuild, that was when the letter went out and everybody got traded. Everybody that wasn't nailed down was sent out for whatever the Rangers could get in return, and they rebuilt this team and did so effectively. Obviously some deep playoff runs the last couple of seasons, but this time around, I think the Rangers are trying to do what the Devils and Caps basically did from last year to this year. Both those teams were down last year, and the Caps made the playoffs, but basically by default, they were the 16th of the 16 playoff teams. Rangers swept them right out. The Devils were kind of a mess last year. Both those teams made some, moves in the offseason. Didn't completely gut the roster or anything like that, but they made some moves that were clearly going to make both teams better, and that's what's happened. Caps have the best record in the Eastern Conference. Devils struggling lately, partially due to injuries. But both those teams are, obviously doing a lot better this year than they did last year. I think the Rangers believe that they can do a similar thing. Keep some of the core pieces in place, build around some of the young guys, and retool. Get guys, these aging veterans, that the part of the core that's stale, like Mika, like Kreider. Again, I'm convinced Kreider's gone before next season. Mika, possibly. We will see. But I think that's the idea here, that they want to, again, just rebuild and not rebuild, but do a retooling, and I'll be right back in the mix as soon as this upcoming season. The only other thing I want to do here today before we call it is one to talk briefly about what the Rangers gave away here. Obviously, Filip Chytil, Victor Mancini, and the protected first-round pick. Filip Chytil, like I said, we're going to send him off proper with a full-on tribute episode a little bit later this week, or I guess that would be next week, probably like on Tuesday or Wednesday, once the Rangers get done with this back-to-back on the weekend. Talk about his best moments as a Ranger, everything that he's been through, all that good stuff. But for now, I'll just say, man, I hope he has nothing but health and awesome hockey in front of him, because he deserves it. He's been through a lot. So I really hope that Filip Chytil can go ahead and light it up with the Vancouver Canucks. As for Mancini, some promise there. He looked really good in the rookie series against the Flyers. He played well in the preseason and made the opening night roster, due in part to the injury to Ryan Linger, but nevertheless made the opening night roster. Thought he might have a future here, but again, you got to give up something if you want to bring in a JT Miller. And Mancini, as well as he played in the preseason and certain games in the regular season, he had some good games and some not so good games. He can't be the deal breaker. You can't not bring in JT Miller because, we can't give up Victor Mancini. So, it's tough to say bye to any of these players, but again, I think the price is right here. As much as it sucks to give up Filip Chytil and Victor Mancini, this to me feels like a deal that the Rangers had to make. And obviously, they feel the same way as well. But we'll call it there for tonight. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at jchick17. Once again, that is at jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.